my name's Elizabeth. Today I'll be talking about racism in the criminal justice system. So, in the past 2 years, there seems to have been a rise in awareness of injustice against people of color that started with the shooting of the unarmed Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman. Many people claim that the criminal justice system is colorblind, yet how can that be true when a 12-year-old black boy playing with a toy gun in a park in an open carry state can be shot and killed, compared to a white rapist who was caught in the act of raping an unconscious woman, getting only 6 months in prison and being released early, 3 months, for good behavior. So my claim today is that people of color disproportionately suffer hardships by the criminal justice system. By people of color, I mean mainly blacks and Hispanics. So, people of color disproportionately suffer hardships by the criminal justice system. 1, because they are more likely to have problems with the police, and 2, because they're more likely to be convicted and have harsher and longer sentences when compared to Caucasians. So, people of color are more likely to have problems with the police. They are more likely to be profiled. By profiled, I mean suspected of crime. A post by the Huffington Post says that people of color are stopped at higher rates than whites. And when they're stopped, they are frisked at higher rates than whites, with 65% of blacks and Hispanics being stopped and frisked, compared to only 5% of whites who are stopped and frisked. Another post by the Huffington Post cites a working study by Harvard economist Roland Fryer, who concluded that black people were more likely to experience use by force by the police, so they're more likely to be abused by the police. My second point is that people of color are more likely to be convicted than whites and receive harsher and longer sentences. For example, back to George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman's case of self-defense against Trayvon Martin was held up in court. Yet, Marissa Alexander, a 31-year-old black woman, shot a warning shot at the wall to scare off her abusive husband, whom she already had a restraining order against. Her case of self-defense was rejected in court, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. They were both prosecuted by the same Florida prosecutor, General Angela Corey. So in 2014, the FBI found that blacks made up only 27.8% of arrests, while whites, including Hispanics, made up 69.4% of arrests. Blacks make up only 12.6% of the population, but they make up 37.1% of inmates. The state federal inmates per 1,000 in 2010 were 4,347 black men, 1,775 Hispanic men, and only 678 white men. The U.S. Sentencing Commission found that blacks receive sentences that are 10% longer than whites for the same crimes. There are also more people of color with life sentences than whites, with 45.0% being blacks, 24.2% being Hispanics, 24.8% being whites, and only 6% being others. A lot of this could be because of the war on drugs. Blacks and whites engage in drug offenses, possessions, and sales at roughly the same rate, according to a report on race and drug enforcement published by the Human Rights Watch in 2008. The National Association for Colored People released a fact sheet that states that African Americans only make up about 12% of the total population of drug users, but they make up 38% of those arrested for drug offenses and 59% of those in prison for drug offenses. So to conclude, people of color, mainly blacks and Hispanics, suffer disproportionately hardships by the criminal justice system because they're more likely to have problems with the police, and they are more likely to be convicted and have harsher and longer sentences when compared to sentences for Caucasians.
Thank you. Try to be like
Thanks.
Great booster, huh?
Yeah.
Just trying to be like. It's my job.
And she's sick too.
I have bronchitis.
You can't even play the sick card.
Yeah, you can't play. She probably likes the Dodgers, you don't, and she's already winning on that one too. Shit.
Well,
It's okay, you guys have learned.
All right, Elizabeth, on the technical stuff, everything is solid. The proposition is clear. There's a good preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. Controversy is obviously something that's going on. I do think some of the examples are perhaps a little problematic. I think they aren't we're going to talk about analogies and comparisons, and a couple of them I think are a little bit problematic. I am interested in that one case, though, that you had that mentioned Zimmerman and then the woman who went to prison for defending herself for 20 years. I'd be interested in knowing the details on that particular case, because that sounds like it's a good comparison of the examples. I thought that you did a pretty good job explaining the assumptions behind your arguments, and there's a lot of statistical information that you present that seems fine and supports the position that you were taking. I still think that we have a little bit of that issue that you and I talked about here, that there's a question between what is proportional and what's disproportional. And I think that the place that you had the best argument was on the drug use issue, where you had a statistic that showed that they represent only 12% of the drug use problem, but they are disproportionately represented in the arrests and prosecutions and convictions. That I thought worked really well. On the other stuff, it sounded to me like it's one of the things that happens is we have more of those problems in particular kinds of communities, and that's why those problems exist becomes perhaps an issue that the respondent's going to be talking about. We won't make their argument for them in this particular situation. We'll let them do that. But I thought you cited your evidence very well and did a good job on that. Your presentation is pretty solid. I think you're rushing a little bit, maybe. You can kind of pause to let some of the ideas and concepts sink in, especially when you've got one section where there's a whole bunch of statistical information that you're presenting, and it just starts piling up. And what does it all mean? I think that you need to take the time once in a while to explain what the implication of those differences is a little bit more clearly, instead of just assuming that everybody's following the numbers, which they may not. Remember, the numbers can easily be something that people will tune out on. All right, thank you.